What about the second alternative, that the fine-tuning of the universe is due to chance? Well, the problem with this alternative is that the odds against the universe's being life-permitting are so incomprehensibly great that they cannot be reasonably faced. So, in order to rescue the alternative of chance, its proponents have been forced to adopt the remarkable hypothesis that there exists an infinite number of randomly ordered parallel universes, forming a kind of world ensemble of which our universe is but a member. And somewhere in this infinite world ensemble, finely tuned universes will appear by chance alone, and we happen to be in one such world. And this is the explanation that Dawkins fastens on in order to respond to the teleological argument. Now, Dawkins is acutely sensitive to the objection that postulating such an infinite world ensemble of randomly ordered universes seems to be what he calls, and I quote, an unparsimonious extravagance. But he retorts, quote, the multiverse may seem extravagant in sheer number of universes, but if each one of those universes is simple in its fundamental laws, we are still not postulating anything highly improbable. Let me repeat that response. The multiverse may seem extravagant in sheer number of universes, but if each one of those universes is simple in its fundamental laws, we are still not postulating anything highly improbable. Now, this response to the objection is just multiply confused. Let me point out 4 confusions in this response. First, each universe in the ensemble is not simple. They're not simple. Each one is characterized by a multiplicity of constants and quantities. If each universe were simple, then why did Dawkins feel the need to recur to a world ensemble in the first place? You could just say our world is simple and therefore it doesn't need a designer. Second confusion, Dawkins assumes that the simplicity of the whole is a function of the simplicity of its parts. He assumes that if the parts are simple, then the whole is simple. And this is just an obvious mistake. Think of a beautiful Roman mosaic. A complex mosaic is made up of a great number of individually simple parts, little bits of blue and red and yellow. And yet, taken together, the whole mosaic can be an incredibly complex portrait, say, of a Roman face. Now, in exactly the same way, an ensemble of universes will still be complex if those universes are all randomly ordered in their fundamental constants and quantities, rather than all sharing the same values. So it's just not true that the simplicity of the whole is a function of the simplicity of the parts. Third confusion, Occam's razor. Occam's razor is a principle which says do not multiply causes beyond necessity. You're only justified in postulating such causes as are necessary to explain the effect. And in this case, the number of universes being postulated simply to explain the fine-tuning is extravagant. It's a violation of Occam's razor. Appealing to the world ensemble to explain fine-tuning is sort of like using a sledgehammer to crack a peanut. You simply don't need to appeal to this extravagant hypothesis. A simple single designer would do the case. And finally, number 4, Dawkins tries to minimize the extravagance of the postulate of a world ensemble by saying that despite its extravagant number of worlds, still the postulate is not highly improbable. It may have an extravagant number of universes, but the postulate is not highly improbable. Now, it's not clear why this is relevant or even what this means. The objection under consideration is not that the postulate of a world ensemble is improbable. The objection is that it's an unparsimonious extravagance. And to say that it's not also highly improbable is just to bring up an irrelevancy. It's not addressing the point that the postulate is unparsimonious and extravagant. Indeed, it's hard to know what probability Dawkins is talking about here. When he says it's not improbable, what's he mean? Improbable with respect to what? He seems to mean that the intrinsic probability of the postulate of a world ensemble, considered apart from the evidence for fine-tuning, is not great. The intrinsic probability is not great. But how do you determine the intrinsic probability of this postulate? By its simplicity? Well, in that case, he hasn't shown that it's not improbable because it's not a simple hypothesis, as we saw. So it seems to me that Dawkins' retort is just multiply confused. What Dawkins needs to say, I think, or what he means to say perhaps, is that the postulate of a world ensemble of universes might still be simple if there is a single simple mechanism that generates the multiplicity of worlds through a repetitive process. In that way, the huge number of worlds wouldn't be a deficit of the theory because they all issue from the same simple repetitive mechanism.